Welcome to Writers Not Writing. This used to be a show where I interviewed authors about the ways they procrastinated, and I'm sure we'll still have some of that. But in these times, I want to use this show to highlight artists who are using their voices to push back against fascism. Whether we're writing or not writing, we need to be defending one another. I'm Benjamin Gorman, your friendly author in exile, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer, who hitched a ride in my suitcase. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff, and Doug does his best to make me sound better. Welcome to Writers Not Writing. You're going to enjoy today's show. And if you want a little more, become a patron of my Patreon, of the show, just for supporters of the Patreon. And you'll get access to an ad-free version of the show with a bonus segment with each interviewee.
Yes, you
are
the best.
Here we go.
If I take my time.
Hail and well met, readers and reviewers. I am very excited to have my guest today. Phoebe Barton is a queer trans science fiction writer. Her short fiction has appeared in Analog, Lightspeed, and FNSF, and her story, The Mathematics of Fairyland, won the Aurora Award for the Best Short Story in 2022. She lives with her family, a robot, and 9 typewriters in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Phoebe, welcome. I'm glad to have you here today.
Thanks to be here.
I do want to hear more about that robot, but first, what's the deal with the typewriters?
I like typewriters. They're good machines. There are, in this room that I am in right now during recording, there are 6 typewriters in this room with me, and they all work.
And how far back do they go?
The oldest one that I have is from 1948, but it doesn't work. My oldest functioning one is from 1951.
Wow.
Sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to ask, do you have like like IBM? Like what are are you into like the brands and knowing the kind of history of the typewriters?
I am a slut for Royal typewriters.
Ah,
That is, I have multiple of their machines, and they built with quality because, for example, the one from 1951 is a Royal Quiet Deluxe. And I mean, it's been worked on, but that means it's 74 years old and is still working fine. My main machine is a 1961 Royal FP desktop typewriter that was meant for office work. And it is extremely solid and extremely great for doing things like writing angry letters to politicians.
yes. Well, and I want every listener and viewer right now, look at the device in front of you and think to yourself, how long will this thing last? Because I guarantee it's not 70 years. They used to build these machines to last, and now planned obsolescence. You don't want them to last because then people don't have to buy more of them. But people used to want something to not have to replace, and it was a value to be able to buy a Royal that would last for 70 years. That's so cool. And you're still able to find ribbon. You're still able to find everything you need for it.
Yes, I know a lot of places that sell ribbons, and there's a place in Toronto called Toronto Typewriters that sells typewriters and does typewriter maintenance. So most of my typewriters I've bought from them, and I get mine serviced there.
That is, well, and I used to be really, really strict on the show about this. This isn't a show about process. This is a show about getting to know writers. But I do want to ask, do you compose on a typewriter? Is that something that's part of your process?
No, it's something I would like to do, but for what I've found is it's useful for when I'm trying to think something out.
Hmm.
Because since it does take more time for me to type something on a typewriter than write something on a keyboard, just because the structure of the keyboard is the same, but it takes much more force to actuate a key on a mechanical keyboard than it does on an electronic keyboard. So I type slower. That means my train of thought is further ahead of what I'm writing, and so I can essentially have discussions with myself or just figure things out in the process. So it is useful for sorting out loose, rough ideas or when there's just a big
To kind of force yourself to
swirling.
slow
Yeah,
down.
Or
That's
when there's a
interesting.
big, yeah, or when there's a big swirling void and I'm trying to make sense of it, I can put it there. Like I've used it more for things like synopses and
Yeah.
so on because the way I like when I'm actually writing, I move things around a lot. I do a lot of editing in the document itself. So it would take a lot for me to go to a typewriter mode
Oh, yeah.
where I can't change what's already been done.
I mean, it is. It's a different kind of process when you can't go, I would like to take this sentence and move it up. Like it does change the way that we write. I'm dating myself a little bit here, but my father, I remember had a typewriter. My mom was the early adopter of like the two color monitor in her office, and my dad had a typewriter, and all through college and everything, and you learn to like, you know. They were more meticulous for one thing about typos because if you have a typo, you've got to retype the entire page. And so they write thinking about spelling certainly more than I do. But I remember going into my dad's office when I was young and hammering away at the keys. And if you are typing fast enough, they'll catch one another. And so you can't type too fast. Whereas it is possible on a computer to type too fast and that the cursor like catches up later. I know I'm going really fast when like I'm ahead, but never that locking up motion. So you're right. I can see a benefit to certain parts of the process to being slowed. That's
And I think, yeah, I think there are a lot of benefits, and especially in the modern age. For one, like there are so many issues with like in schools, for example, for students using like LLMs to generate things. One way the one way you could be sure that a student is not using an LLM is to generate an essay is
uh-huh.
to have them write them on typewriters in class.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was a public school teacher, high school teacher for 21 years, and just towards the end of my career, we were always trying to figure out what is going to be the strategy to make sure students are composing their own work. And, typewriters are expensive. That would have been an investment, but certainly I'm thinking for students for whom I would have, said, okay, we're all going to work on a paragraph on paper and just handwrite. And for my students some of my students with certain disabilities, handwriting was a real challenge. And that kind of segment in between of, I don't want you working on a computer, but I recognize that handwriting would be unfair to
Mhm.
you. A typewriter would have been a wonderful
Yeah.
thing for us to have there in the school for that exact reason, so that I know you're
And
doing the composing.
and typewriters are actually less expensive than you would think, especially
Mm.
in terms of comparison, because like no one will be able to see this on the podcast, but over my shoulder, I have a green 1958 Royal Futura 800 typewriter. That cost me about, I think, $150. When it was new, it also cost $150, but with inflation, that's more like $1,500.
Right. Yes, that was a
So,
very expensive device at the time. Although, I mean, again, to compare to a computer, which loses its value so fast, the fact that it's still got any value at all, it has retained value much better than a cell phone, a computer,
and also in this age, I think it is very useful to have equipment for creating writing and stuff that is very difficult to be electronically monitored. Like,
Yes.
technically, you can bug typewriters. That is a thing that was done in the Cold War, like with the Selectrics in the US Embassy, but it involved physically attaching a bug to the typewriters themselves. So,
Wow.
like, and if an adversary has physical access to your typewriters, then
Yeah. The
you've
jig
got
is up.
problems anyway.
Right, right. But no, that's a really good point. I'm trying to remember the name of the author I was talking with, who was kind of envisioning a future where so much of what we will be offered is AI generated, and was, his kind of speculation is kind of like in the age of recorded music, where the value then of, going to see a live show and seeing real humans composing something takes on this new meaning. He speculates that we will get to a place where people want to go to readings of stuff that is handwritten. Because then you know the person who is standing there reading this to you is human, the thing that they have written is human, and that is a benefit rather than, but also, yes, I think in the age of rising fascism, knowing that your work is not, if you type it up, it can't be used to train AI. It can't read that thing. That's really valuable. Um, so speaking of the rise of right-wing fascism, there's a lot coming at us every day right now. What is a strategy that you are finding that you have been employing to kind of fight back lately?
Living out of spite, mostly,
Yep,
because
yep.
that is something I can do because honestly, surviving is a knife in the eye to their platforms and goals, regardless.
This is
Just
this sounds like a joke. It is not. This is a really, really important point that I think people who have, like me, who've got a lot of privilege, cishet, middle-aged white guy, like we're absolutely the worst. Like understanding that for, many, many people, existing is an act of resistance. And I think you're absolutely right. And existing out loud. Like, the fact that you are able to publish into the world and be yourself is an act of fighting back.
yeah, though I not knowing what's going to happen is a little bit stressful
I can only
because
imagine.
especially since so much of the science fiction fantasy publishing apparatus is based in the United States and everything is off the table. Like nothing is the same anymore. So there's no room for comfortable predictions like there was in 2017 of like I'll st like things will things are bad, but things are not. Will I continue be able to submit to these magazines in the US? Bad.
Well, but this is so I work with a group, a fledgling group called Publishing Professionals Against Book Bans, and we're an offshoot of Authors Against Book Bans, and we are trying to be the organization that says to people who are in the publishing profession, don't soft censor, don't, watch yourself. We're going to keep an eye on one another to not do this. But I think it's far more important for you to be telling the world and telling me, what the fear, what is it that we envision could happen to publishing? Because you're right, this is scary, a scary time in that way. What could happen to the publishing industry that could impinge on your work?
Well, the main thing I get is I'm not, well, as I said, nothing is 0% probability anymore. Like even like a US invasion of Canada, for example, is low probability, but compared to 6 months ago, it is not zero probability. So I don't, I'm not so worried about about laws or active what's the word opposition from the US government so much as I am of compliance in advance.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's and so the we've talked about in this group, one of the challenges for an author is we're getting rejected all the time. Like you're sending stuff off, you don't know why a piece was rejected. And so soft censorship could be so pernicious because it could just be, oh, trans authors are getting rejected more than before. Well, why? Is this because there is a decision being made in a boardroom? We're not going to touch this work because we have decided to comply in advance. And that's really concerning.
Yeah, I mean, magazines are a bit safer than that just because like there are no boardrooms in magazines for one. Like, well, as far as I know, my understanding is it is like at the major it is the editors making the
Right.
decisions. Like they don't have structures above them. And to my understanding, for everything I've heard with the recent acquisition of Analog Asimovs and FNSF, those acquisition decisions are still remaining with the editorial staff as they have previously been. So
Yeah. And that, so
I it
the yeah,
I was
exactly.
just going to say, but what you're saying though, it does feel like something that is of much greater threat in long form
Yes.
in books.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's, although it could take place in a magazine too, I could totally imagine a magazine saying, we are afraid of pushback from legislation, or we're afraid of harassment, online, so we're just not going to publish anything by this demographic or that demographic. And that's a scary time for folks. And it's a time when those editors need to be reminded, supported, and also kind of mindful of, am I even doing that? Like, it's the kind of thing that could happen on a almost subconscious level, where folks just go, I don't really want to weigh in on, I'm hesitant about this piece, and I'm not acknowledging that I'm also hesitant for this other reason, so I'll reject. And we just need to be really thoughtful about making a conscious effort to say, I am going to support trans authors. I'm going to support authors of color right now. I'm going to support women. I'm going to support any group that the regime targets.
And also just to that fact too, is that it has only been 2 months.
Exactly. Yes, this is happening so fast. And and I think that inclines folks to even more of that obeying in advance. They're going, I have to make publishing decisions that are, especially when it comes to long form, it's a book, it's 2 years out or whatever. And so they're saying to themselves, who knows how bad it's going to get? Maybe we just will say no now. Like, do not obey in advance. Yeah. Ugh, that's grim, but it is something I'm very glad you brought that up, because that's something people need to be thinking about now. How are we going to make sure we are continuing to publish voices in a time when people may be being rejected and they don't know why? Also, be listeners out there, uh, be gracious and loving and kind to your, trans friends and because folks are dealing with a stress you don't have to deal with all the time right now. It's got to be a lot. Um, so yeah, this is a very legitimate fear, and I think that it is one that we should. The more we talk about it, the healthier we'll be. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. So in this, when you're dealing with all this and all these things are coming at you, I think it's really easy for some stories to get lost. What is one of the things you want to make sure people keep an eye on?
I would say just the health and just well-being of any marginalized friends that they have. Like I like trans friends, like friends of color, like any kind of marginalization that is being affected by what's going on, because like I can speak to me like just by being white but being trans, it is an incredibly heavy weight on me just existing. So I cannot imagine how much worse it is for people who share that marginalization and have additional ones
Exactly.
like piled on top of it.
Yeah. And I think a lot in this last, really week, it seems like it's been a tipping point, but I'm sure it's been an incredible stressor for folks who are in that kind of liminal space in terms of their documentation, where they have been living a life going, I am safe, I am comfortable, I have my green card, I have my permanent residency that is assured in the United States, and now to find out that it's not. And that's got to be very, very frightening. So if somebody is in another marginalized community as well, and also now is suddenly finding out that one thing they thought was safe isn't as safe, yeah, reach out to those folks. Let them know that you care about them right now. That's really important. So
Yeah, because I was going to just say it was a failure of my personal imagination and that I expected it to get bad quickly for trans people. But again, that's because that's like, as a trans woman, that's what I'm thinking about a lot. I did not expect it to get so quickly so bad for so many other people.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel that as well. I worked with a lot of students who were from immigrant communities, and so that was the community where I thought this is going to get really, really bad for these folks very, very fast, and didn't think the one that has taken me by surprise. There's some legislation that is by its design anti-trans. It is about taking away the right to vote to anybody who has changed their name. But the writers, there's no way to construct that doesn't also take away the rights of people who have changed their names who are cis, which includes in the United States almost all married women. And so again, there's another group where I'm sure, a lot of married women of privilege who, changed their names when they got married, didn't think this is going to have an effect on me, and I'm not in these other marginalized communities, are finding out, no, this group will marginalize your community as well. Just by being a married woman, your right to vote is threatened. That is, yeah. So I think a lot of us are in that place where we're finding out, oh, there are even more people who are threatened than I thought. Um, so, lest this get too overwhelming, what is something that you've been doing to kind of protect your mental health lately?
Tetris.
And have you been a
I
long-term Tetris person?
Not entirely. I don't even remember if I had it for NES. What I do, I have a Switch and I have the Nintendo Online subscription. So it's the 1989 NES version of Tetris, which I think is I think is perfection.
Yeah,
I don't see how you can improve on that.
yeah.
So.
Every version I've seen that tries to add bells and whistles, I'm like, you don't, this, you're not making the game better. It is pure.
And like it gets to the point where now like I can close my eyes or don't even have to close my eyes and I see rows and Tetris blocks and so on. And but I have gotten better to the point where I can fairly reliably get the UFO ending.
And does it, I don't even know how far you have to go for a UFO ending. What is that?
120,000 points.
Holy cow. Yeah. So is it soothing? Like, do you feel like, because for some people, a game like that stresses them out. Do you find that it is a kind of flow state zone where you can, calm
Yeah,
down?
and yeah, it does have that, and it's also a case of managing my thoughts too, because
Hmm.
like I'll be playing it and there'll also be whatever thoughts are rattling around in my head. So it's almost like as I'm playing Tetris and arranging the blocks, I'm also arranging the thoughts in my head and seeing like what sticks around or what I'm able to let go of.
Yeah. My wife has a game which it's lately it's been Angry Birds, but before I think it was Candy Crush or one of those. And it was for that exact reason. When she's playing it, she can, kind of tune out. She doesn't even like think about the fact that she's playing really. Like it's just this thing and it allows her to just think. And that, is can be so for folks out there listening, these kinds of games are not mindless per se. It's actually intellectually engaging in one way, but it gives you time to process. And do you find does it change what you think about while you are playing?
No, not really. Like it's more along the lines of things come up that I wouldn't have expected to come
Hmm.
up. Like for example, the last time I was playing, I got while I was playing, I got fixated on there is an SCP that is an infinite Seinfeld where George ends up killing Jerry, which results in killing everyone in the world.
I've got it. Where is this? I've never
Uh,
heard of this.
It's SC the Secure Contain Protect a SCP. It's a creepypasta. Are you familiar with like Warehouse 13, the
No.
series?
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sort of that idiom. And I'm just looking up the specific one that I was mentioning that thinking of is SCP-6697.
So is this a short story written in text
Uh
form, or is this a film and somebody made, or?
it's in writing. It's I wouldn't call it a short story because these things they're basically summaries of these items
Hmm.
involving like what they are, how they are contained, descriptions of what they do, and so on and so forth.
Oh, you will have to send me a link. I'll post the link in the show notes. So folks who are listening right now will have a link to that in the show notes because that sounds fascinating. Now, how many of these are there? Is this a rabbit hole that I'm going to fall down for hours and hours?
It is an extremely deep rabbit hole. Like it has been going for I think over 10 years.
Oh, is it is it on Tumblr, or is it
No,
its own page?
its own wiki site.
Oh, very cool. Okay, it sounds like a Tumblr-esque kind of community. That's I'll bet the writers are Tumblrers. That sounds really fun. I will fall down that rabbit hole and be going, Phoebe, you took hours of my life away. That's great. Okay, so I want to uh, employ you in helping me in writing this story. So we have been doing a bit of collaborative storytelling each week, and we've got our character Zil Naroth. Zil is 11 years old. Zil lives on the edge of the Empire. Zil's father was conscripted, and she was put in the care of a person in town who Zil found to be very boring, and Zil escaped. And Zil believes that she can get to her aunt living way out on the coast. And where we left off, and she's traveling alone, at least at first, very dangerous in this fantasy world of Vromia. And she hides out in a market cart with a Zaman who we named Jesmar. And uh, so Zil and Jesmar traveled to this town, and our in our last week's show, folks who listened to the last week's show, we acquired the kind of third member of the party, a person who was creating a lantern, and that person did not have a name last week, but I was interviewing the author Ellie Bangs, and so we're in Ellie's honor, we're going to name this character Banel. So Banel is a tinkerer and has this lantern that can theoretically ward off the terrors that come at night and attack people who are not in lit spaces. But it doesn't work yet. It is a prototype, and Banel is trying to get investors, and the crowd was getting a little raucous. And so Jesmar and Zil rescued Banel and got this poor guy into Jesmar's cart for safety, and that's where we left off. So, what happens next?
Well, I was thinking about the lantern itself and whether or not it d doesn't work. What may be more interesting, the fact is it does work, but in unpleasant or uncomfortable ways
Mm,
that still need to be ironed out, such as it does keep the horrors at bay, but it also illuminates the ghosts of your
mm.
great regrets or your great failures.
So there's some negative effect that it has, which, and is Banel aware of this fault?
I would say yes,
Oh,
because otherwise it's like after it's still a prototype,
right.
but that's the kind of fault where you're not going to get a lot of people who really want to use it, especially even if it's just like it's a cost. It's not a cost that is something as simple as you can use it, but it hurts physically or it poisons you by using it, which is something I thought of originally, but as the first thing that I thought of, how about I keep going with this instead and see what else I come up
I
with?
well, and I like this a lot because in this universe, and this is the portion of the story that I'm actually working on as a novel that's taking place very, very far away from here in the in the city, in the capital, in the center. There is a magical item. There is essentially a drug that people are using to be able to have magic. And the people who live way out here on the periphery, they don't know that they even have access to magic. Spoiler, they do, but they don't have this drug, and they believe that that's necessary. And it does have that feature where the people who are using an inferior version of it, it is toxic. And then the people who are using a very, very, refined version, it kind of creates this hierarchy, this class stratification in the big city. Still's way out on the edge of the world, but Banel, if Banel is somebody who can create this thing, Banel must have access to magic, which means Banel is, as a tinkerer, probably from the scribe caste in the big city, and has now come very, very far out into the periphery with this prototype design. And I love the idea that, Banel's aware this thing isn't toxic, but it has this other effect. So Banel is now in the cart with hiding in Jesmar's cart. Jesmar is distracting everybody by selling Zerwares. There are four genders in this world, and Jesmar is Zaman. So Zaman are kind of ace and um, uh, uh, androgynous in their presentation, very intentionally androgynous in their presentation. So Jesmar is selling their wares and trying to distract the crowd and keep them from, going after this guy she's just helped, saved. And Zill's got this guy. And I think the next big question for them is, do they stay in this town for the rest of the day? They've shown up, it's morning. They could sell their wares, they could stay, and he could hide out in the cart all day, or they could leave. But if they leave, they're going to be between towns at night with his lantern as their only kind of protection. They try not to be out at night outside of a town. What do you think they choose to do?
Well, is there any direct threat in the town? Like, is there anything pushing them to that would give them a valid reason to get ahead of or get away from?
So when they arrived, it was a near riot of people, starting to scream and yell at this guy. So this is now for us to decide, does the crowd kind of are they successfully calmed by Jesmar? And what Jesmar sells is like the the raw ingredients for things like textiles to then make, clothing out of. So wouldn't be a very exciting presentation. So maybe they are able to kind of calm everyone. Or maybe the crowd can't be calmed and they have
Yeah.
to decide to go.
I think it would be a lot more interesting if the crowd wasn't calm because then like it forces them into the like having to trust in a prototype that may or may not protect them over the wrath of a crowd that is very directly threatening.
So I love this. So Jesmar returns from this, presentation going, it's not working. The crowd is, still throwing things. They are still angry. They want this guy's blood. We've got to get out of town. And uh, I guess one question we need to determine in terms of characterization is, does Jesmar, it's Jesmar's cart. They're traveling with this stowaway, and now this guy they've rescued. Do they ask these other characters, should we leave, or do they say we're getting out, and make that decision? Because I think that tells us something about Jesmar. Is Jesmar going to engage with them in the cart as people are starting to throw things or going, hey everybody, we're getting out of here.
Hey, we're getting out of here. That
Yeah.
seems the most appropriate thing based on the circumstances.
Yeah. And Banel finding himself in this position where he's going, "Oh my gosh, I was just threatened." Is there a reason why he would disagree, or do you think he's going, "Absolutely, let's get out of here"?
Well, it's not. it's not tested to that full degree yet. Like it has been tested
Um,
in it has been gone through some testing, but much closer to a town just in case something happens, rather than being tested far away from any point of potential refuge.
Yeah. So Banel's saying, thank you both for rescuing me. Sure, let's go. But also maybe conveying some message. Your lantern's going to keep us safe, right? We got to get out of here. Yeah, it's going to be fine. Let's go. Like knowing, oh, I don't actually know. Oh, that's great. So, and Zill is, Zill prefers to be out in the wilderness in a way that is dangerous. Like Zill's father used to take her out during the day to kind of explore, and that's where she is happiest. And so she's like, "Great, we're leaving a town and we're getting out into the wilderness. That's cool." But she's 11, right? She is not thinking about, oh, tonight is going to be really, really fraught. That's going to be scary. So the three of them leave town, and it's still late morning. It's noonish, and they're leaving. And I think Jesmar is the one who is most cognizant of, okay, now this is going to put us in a bind in a number of ways. They didn't get to sell anything in town. They didn't get to restock on food and supplies. They are now going to be out in the dark, in danger. And Banel is going, well, that just blew up in my face. And Banel's now traveling the wrong direction. So Banel came from the big city and they're now moving north. So they're moving back along his path. What happens next in the afternoon to them?
That really brings up the possibility of they encounter someone on the road
Mm.
who has words for Banel, like in terms of like I don't know if Banel is a sort of character who would like cause problems on purpose, but someone who feels that they were wronged
and
by
and and maybe has even been
Banel.
chasing Banel, and now Banel's, yes. So, what is this other person's problem with Banel? I love this. Let's develop that.
Banel acquired from them some some component that is used in the lantern, and do they want that component back for for a very important reason. I think it would be more interesting if it was not something that it was not something that Banel stole. It was something that Banel acquired legitimately, but the person Banel acquired it from has decided that for whatever reason this transaction must be nullified. They need this thing back for whatever reason.
And without that component, the lantern will not work. So the stakes are, if we give this person what will satisfy them, we're now without the lantern tonight. Right. And so that's that. I think that's great. Okay. That's an excellent cliffhanger. We will find out next week what happens when this newcomer tries to take the lantern from them as they travel north. I like that a lot. Okay, so we're going to go to our commercial break. When we come back, Phoebe, I'm going to ask you what you've been daydreaming about lately. Hey, readers and reviewers. I want to put out an all call for guests who are fighting back against fascism. If you know an author or artist of any kind who is using their art or their platform to push back, especially if they are doing so in an interesting way that deserves more attention and support, share this show with them and encourage them to email NotAPipePublishing at NotAPipePublishing@gmail.com, and we'll get them scheduled. And if you're looking for inspiring or practical ways you can push back, be sure to subscribe to the show so you catch all the great guests folks are going to recommend. See you here each week. This week's episode of Writers Not Writing is brought to you by Amanda Cherry's steampunk airship novel, Dawn Calamity. Marin would have done just about anything to avoid stepping aboard the decrepit airship Dawn, and discovering the woman she has a secret crush on is on board is only making things more awkward. When they find themselves behind enemy lines, Marin has to take charge, avoid the enemy at the gate, and find a way to bring the airship crew home. Nominated for the Endeavor Award and the Ursula K. Le Guin Award, Dawn Calamity has critics raving. This is the undercover princess on a doomed airship mission with her queer crush you didn't know you needed. Now you know. Don't miss out, writes Karen Eisenbray, author of Ego and Endurance. Nancy Ballard, author of the Under Carrico's Moons trilogy, writes, Dawn Calamity is full of intrigue and action. Get your copy of Dawn Calamity wherever fine books are sold, or use the coupon code SHOWFAN to save 10% on your entire order at the NotAPipePublishing store.
You deserve a vacation.
How about a trip to a dude ranch on a colony planet?
Or a journey to a universe where wizards call lightning down from the sky and calm rumbling volcanoes?
Or a holiday tour of the major cities of Europe with vampires and werewolves and witches as guides.
Or maybe just a nice hot sudsy bath with a book of poetry that will make you cry and sigh and laugh.
We've got you covered.
A paperback will appear on your doorstep each month to whisk you away, and you'll return refreshed, enlightened, and ready to make the world we share a brighter place for everyone.
Or if you prefer, you can sign up for a quarterly subscription and get 4 YA titles, 4 adult titles, or 4 collections of poetry per year.
Plus, you'll get book club questions from the author before you start the book and an interview with the author afterwards.
So, if you are in a book group or want to start one, this is everything you need in a kit. Will we occasionally throw in some extra surprises just to say thank you to our members? Of course.
You can also give someone their very own membership with all of the rights and privileges pertaining thereto.
So, find a reward level that's right for you.
And share this with your friends.
Join the Indulge Your Shelf book club today. Your bookshelves deserve a little pampering. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'm here with Phoebe Barton. And Phoebe, when you've been daydreaming, what have you been daydreaming about lately?
Multiple things. Been thinking a lot about space habitats recently because I really, in these days, I need to have the feeling that there is something beyond this that we can still work towards. And just how these things may work, and just the interesting things of like how they would differ, how they would physically look in the inside, like what it would look like to have, for example, walls of forest on both sides of this city, which is something a bit easier for me to imagine now because where I live in Hamilton, half of the city is below the Niagara Escarpment.
Oh.
So there is this essentially rocky, nearly vertical wall that divides the lower city from what's called the mountain, and it's very well forested. And it occurred to me at one point last summer that you would see that same kind of construction in like for the wall of say like a Stanford Torus, which is just basically a spinning ring type space station. Like I think it like Elysium, but not as big because the traditional ones are a lot smaller and have roofs.
Yes, I wrote about half of a science fiction novel that took place in one of these during the early days of COVID, which I don't know if I will ever be finished. But it was for the same reason. I needed to escape, right? And yes, mine was constructed where but you're right, it would be similar to being surrounded on multiple sides by forest the way you are, but the trees would be growing at you at the center, regardless of what point you are at.
Well, I mean, not necessarily, because they would still be feeling the same like downward pulling like centripetal force. I can never remember if it's
Is it centripetal or centrifugal? I know,
Yeah.
me either, because it's always both. when something's spinning. One is pulling out, one's pulling in, and which is which, I can never remember. Somebody out there who is listening right now is just screaming at their
Yeah.
screen. Which pulls
But
away, which
especially,
pulls...
yeah. But especially since these would need to be like heavily, heavily managed.
Right.
So,
So you could conceivably grow them so that you create kind of an artificial sense that you're in a space with a gravity
mhm.
that is, oh, that would be
Yeah. And
interesting.
honestly, just in terms of the human factor, it's far more pleasant to be able to look to one side and see a forest than to look to one side and see like a gray metal wall.
Hmm. Yeah,
Because like the human factor is most important because I think one of the biggest problems of this age that people are becoming aware of and working towards to various degrees is the importance and of humans in general, like that humans matter, like like the whole concept of like what are things for? And for example, I can't remember who posted it on Blue Sky the other day. One of the fundamental issue of modern society, at least in the West specifically, is that the question of what is society for has been answered by profit.
yep, yep,
Whereas I think it is my responsibility to tell stories of situations and worlds where profit is not the reason for society to exist, because that's a pretty bad reason for society to exist. It's
and
like,
and not a and not one that philosophically follows, right? Because Kurt Vonnegut said, we will be the first species to ever eliminate ourselves because we were no longer profitable. Like, profit cannot ultimately be the motive because profit isn't necessarily a reason to sustain. And so it is a mechanism, but it cannot be the end goal. Yeah, that's and it falls to us to think about what could a society be built around instead.
I wish there was I wish there was a word. There may be a word that I just don't know that was as succinct as profit, but instead means doing radical things.
Yeah,
Radical in the radical both in the political meaning and the surfer meaning.
yeah, yeah. I the novel the unfinished novel, it took place on a colony ship, and so the motive then becomes much clearer, right? There was a multi-generational colony ship. They know they're not going to arrive at their destination within their lifetimes, right? So the motive for design is how do we keep the maximum number of people alive and happy and sustained because they're gonna, you don't want your people to go crazy in 3 generations, right? So you've got to design this thing to keep, and so it creates a kind of humanism where everything is in the service of keeping these people well on this very, very long journey, right? And it's a different mentality when the design is about for the benefit of the people and not for the benefit of profit. Because
Yes.
who cares if you have a bunch of money waiting for you home 3 generations ago? That does you no good.
Yeah. And I think like again, like I daydream about societies where like one of the fundamental principles is like durability, reliability, and it goes back to what we were talking before about typewriters because I mean when these were being made, when they were very popular, they were not expected they were not being sold with the expectation they would still be used in 70 years. Like they were putting out new models every year. So like people were still buying these things, but these companies did the thing where they were still mass manufacturing these things, but to a standard that they stand up. Like
Yeah.
even like again, my desktop typewriter was made for office work. So it is like 30 pounds. It is extremely sturdy and durable. You could very easily kill someone with it. And you are you don't that is an example of that kind of durability mm, exist coexisting with a society similar to our own. So it is not impossible.
Oh yeah.
It's just the incentives have been warped to such a
Yeah.
degree that you don't see it anymore because they do still make typewriters. They are just awful because they are mostly made of plastic.
Yeah.
Like you do not buy a 21st century typewriter because it will break on you almost immediately. It is one of the few things I can immediately think of aside from, say, sewing machines, where you're far better buying something that is 70 years old than is 7 months old.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That is interesting to think about. Why those technologies? Why typewriters, sewing machines, these things for really for craftspeople. Like, craftspeople, maybe there's something about our relationship with our tools where we want the tool to last. Like are going to imbue it with some meaning in and of itself.
And then it's also too that the pure mechanicality of them, like all of my typewriters are mechanical because like especially into the late 50s and early 60s, you started seeing electric typewriters, which really started taking over in the 70s. And you had some of the earliest microcomputers that were designed to run with typewriters as their keyboards, essentially.
Yeah.
But I would not buy an electric typewriter just because they're so much more headaches to maintain because like screwing around with a mechanical typewriter is one thing. I can download a technician's manual for one of my typewriters, and it's complicated, but it's all mechanical. But electricity is something that you really shouldn't screw with unless you really know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And modern equipment is just that much more complicated.
Yeah, I think
And
there's, like when you see old cars and they used to have enough space within you'd lift the hood that somebody could sit and put their legs in and work on them because there was so much space, because there was just kind of this assumption you will work on this thing. You will replace parts on this. This will last. And now you lift the hood and there is no space. And it's because you are not going to ever work on this thing. It is going to be plugged into a device. There are going to be software upgrades, but this is not really designed to even be repaired. Like, not manually, not physically. When the physical parts fall apart, this car is done. And so yeah, it's a very different way of thinking about designing something to be maintained.
yeah, it's just looking at the various ways where so many of our dreams of the future are fundamentally incompatible with the way that society is currently run. So it's like, for example, like daydreaming about space habitats. Like, yes, like the technology is a huge hurdle, but that sort of technology, like figuring out how to make a space habitat work, is also the sort of thing that would have a lot of use and applications on Earth as well. The
Yes.
big thing is developing societies that are compatible with it, because my personal belief is that like modern capitalism is fundamentally incompatible with that kind of space habitation. If for no other reason, like the profit motive well, I wouldn't say the profit motive, the profit all-consuming goal.
Yeah. Is not sustainable.
Because
Yeah, and I
it
think I tell folks the reason that we should be interested in space exploration is not about space. As much as it would be very cool to have people traveling to Mars, it's not for the people who are traveling to Mars. It's what we will learn about sustainability for people on Earth. It's what we will learn about creating communities that are sustainable, that would be beneficial to Earth. Like that is why we should be engaging in this kind of science, is as an act of the imagination. You
Well,
know,
also forcing us to learn and to change and improve, as I think is important because realistically, living on Earth is easy mode because Earth does so much for us. And that's one of the things where where I see a lot of criticism of space habitats is how like it's complicated, it's expensive, and so on. But at the same time, I feel like you could also make an argument that living on Earth is like playing Tetris with only the hero and Smash Boy
yeah.
blocks. That's the four vertical and the line and the cube. Because then it's easy because there is no way you can possibly lose unless you choose to. But then there is no challenge, so you have no incentive to improve.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we used to talk a lot in union work about we can do hard things. Like, the, setting out to do very difficult things lifts a group up, you know? Yeah.
And yeah, like I think part of the it is in going into those daydreams, it is why part of me part of me gets frustrated when I see people dismissing them as like wastes of time and money that should never happen because to me what that is the foundation of what that is saying is we should not try to do anything that isn't easy. We should instead live in mediocrity.
Well, and the irony of that I just never will fully get over is the place where people will tell you that the race for the moon and trying to explore space is a waste of time is on their computers via the internet, which they would not have if it were not for the advancements that we made in these efforts to do hard things. And they don't realize the benefits of those to them, which are absolutely necessary for even the statement they are making. The medium wouldn't exist if it weren't for the race to the moon. Like we went from computers the size of city blocks to that same computing power in a greeting card. The reason you can complain about NASA online is because of NASA. Like, yes. So, yeah, I think we need to be reframing. And that's a lot of what we do as science fiction authors, which brings me to my next question for you. So you've got some publishing announcement information as an author. What's coming up that's exciting for you?
Well, I was one of the writers that worked on the game A Death in Hyperspace with many qualified authors. I'll send you a list so you can put in the show notes because I
Forget
don't have a
anyone?
list up
Yes.
right now. I don't want to forget anyone. So, but that game is currently a finalist for a Nebula Award for Best Game Writing. It is
Very
actually
exciting.
my second Nebula Award finalisting for Best Game Writing, the first time that I've ever as part of a group.
Yeah. So I'm going to do a very evil thing here and ask an author to summarize their work because we all know that's. But what is this game about? Because I
Well,
have not played A Death in Hyperspace yet.
in this game, you play as as the guiding AI of a spaceship, former warship, now transport, and during a hyperspace jump, the captain died. And you, as the AI, for some reason, you were unable to see what happened. So you have to conduct your investigation to see who, like, who murdered the captain.
It's Clue in
And
space.
yeah,
It's,
yeah.
that's
And
very cool.
yeah, and the thing is, like, it can, like, you as part of the playthrough, you can, like, the choices you make can determine who actually
Right.
was the murderer, because it's not something that's hard coded. And also another factor that I haven't seen used very much is that this is also a timed game.
Oh. Which is cool. I mean, that harkens back to the, the kind of what are those kinds of mysteries called, where it's it's you're contained in the house, but only till dawn. You will have access to all of these the various suspects. So can you, as the AI, interview people?
Yes, yes. You interview like members of the crew and passengers, and the way the production was split up was that the various very a lot of the various authors were given responsibility for writing one specific character and details regarding that character. So you will have like there is like a variation of styles too, because this is the product of multiple authors that were like working on their own.
Well, and now again, I'm going to betray the kind of premise of the show because I'm very interested in process for this. When you are writing those, are you having to do those kind of decision tree writing where you're saying if this character or if the player chooses to ask this question, these are the answers, and so it's broadening continually in
Y
terms of what your character, how your character might respond?
yes, sort of. Like the actual coding was done by Stewart Baker, who is the project leader of the game. It was done in Twine, and but it is that fundamental thing, like breaking up like into breaking the conversations up so that you can go multiple
Yeah.
ways and have yeah.
Oh, that's
Because
what was that? I mean, how did that feel as a writer? Was that cool? Was that a good experience? Was that really
yeah,
challenging?
it was a good experience, and it wasn't too challenging. Like the most challenging thing I found was just getting into this new setting, because this was a setting that I hadn't developed. So it was like fig learning and figuring out like just get like almost like a new pair of shoes, like
Yeah.
figuring it out, because my previous game was also choice based, but like I did that completely on my own.
Mm.
So I didn't have to work with anyone else in the development. I didn't have to adjust myself
Yeah.
based on anyone else's ideas. Like so, but working with people, other people in that respect can be like is like a really enriching and vitalizing thing, because you're doing this collaborative work, like, and you're all making something that is greater than the sum of its parts.
I just had a couple of authors on the show a couple of weeks ago, Jesse Hennard and Marie Parks, who co-author. And they were talking about how it is essential to have this high degree of respect for the other person in order for that to work, so that you can, go into that process and trust. I mean, a lot of it's like being an actor on stage and knowing you need to be able to work with these other people for this to, be pulled off successfully. But it sounds to me like a lot of what you were learning wasn't video game writing. You'd done that before. It was collaborative writing.
Yeah, yeah, because this was I'm just going through my memories, and I hope I'm not forgetting anything, but this is the first time that I've done collaborative writing that actually went anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's an exercise. Yeah, right. But this, yeah, is not only out in the world, it's out in the world and a finalist for a Nebula. That is very exciting. When is that? Is the voting on now, right?
Uh,
I think the voting is up and going.
yeah, I believe so.
So SIFWA members who are listening to the show, check out A Death in Hyperspace, because it is one of the things you can vote for a Nebula Award. And then they don't announce those till, is that fall?
They will be announced on at the Nebula conference in early June.
Early June. Okay. Oh, that's
Yeah,
exciting. Well,
let
I wish you luck.
actually
That is very exciting. I mean, that would be, you know, folks who are listening, when you can put on your resume Nebula Award winner, it's a big deal. So that's really, really cool. I wish you luck on that. That's
yeah,
exciting.
I believe that's June 7th. They will be
Okay.
announced.
Oh yeah, you'll be on tenterhooks. That's that's gonna be that's an exciting time. So Phoebe, where can folks find you online if they are interested in your work?
Well, my website is phoebebartonsf.com. That has and through there that has links to what I've done and where I'm available where I've done things elsewhere. I'm also very active on Blue Sky at phoebebarton.bsky.social.
Yes, I have every day I'm liking Blue Sky more than all of the other. I have to be on all of them as a publisher because I gotta, promote all our authors' works, and so I'm on way too many platforms, and Blue Sky is my favorite right now. Um, so what's on your to read pile? What's somebody's work you're looking forward to checking out?
Oh, that is definitely this book, One Message Remains, which is a very recent story collection by Premi Mohammed.
Ah, what's that about? Is that sci-fi?
It is I believe it is more fantastic.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, it is developed from her story The General's Turn in the Deadlands. And that is one of the stories that is included, and it's she talks about it far better than I could because I haven't read it yet, even though I did go to its launch. I
Oh,
did get a
cool. That's
signed
cool.
copy,
That's
but
cool.
she is the one who wrote it, so she is able to speak to it a lot better than I can. So I would recommend that anyone listening and interesting look and see what she has said about it herself.
Yes. Well, and sounds like a good potential guest for the show. I should reach out, see if I can get her on. That would be really
Oh,
cool.
if she hasn't been on, she
I
would
have
be an
not.
excellent guest.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, and when did that book come out?
Uh, that launch was just the beginning of March.
Oh, so yeah, so it's a good time for folks to be catching up on that one. One message remains. Okay, I will reach out. Um, and anybody else, any suggestions who I should have on as a guest on this show?
Yeah. First, one person that comes to mind is Millie Ho. She is a writer and poet. I believe she was nominated for a Riesling a couple of years ago, and she writes the Sorrow Bacon comic that you
Oh,
may have
I have
seen
not, but that
on
would be
Blue
good.
Sky.
I will check that out, and I, would like to have
Yeah,
people who work in a variety of media in on the show.
yeah.
And I think I've only had one other comic book artist, so that would be cool.
Yeah. And also like Sidney Hargrave is a very good creator as well. He works in writing and also in art. He did my banner on Blue Sky.
Cool.
And yeah.
Yeah, good person to check out. Okay, and I'll link to both those folks in the show notes so that they, folks who are listening right now can then encourage me. Please connect with those people, get them on the show. Excellent. Well, thank you for those. So before we get to our send off, I need to thank some people. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro. Song I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to the author Stephen E. Scribner, author of the Ton Fantasy series, who also makes music under the name S. Eric Scribner. Thanks for the song A Poem. We use that for the ad break from his album Pianosphere. And if you make music and you'd like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's or Steven's song, so email me about that. Thanks, of course, to Doug, the producer, for making the show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. And I cannot forget to mention Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipe Publishing. So please go to NotAPipePublishing.com, check out the amazing books by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. And if you like the show, write and review it wherever you found it. Please check out Phoebe's short works in, you're everywhere. Where should folks start? What would you say would be the work that they should grab first?
I would say I would recommend you start with the story of my heart, which is Climbing the Mountains of Me on Kaleidotrope. It is available for free. It is linked on my website. and it is the only story I've written that made me cry while I was writing it.
I hear that. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. So I am excited to read that one myself now. I just hearing that from an author, I'm like, oh, I know that moment. Yes. Oh, that's great. And once you read that story by Phoebe, please tell a friend about it. It goes a long way. Let people know about the stuff that you are enjoying. Similarly, for this show, click on that little thumbs up, tell a friend about the show. It really does help. So I appreciate it. I'm too old to say smash that like button, but if you could gently click on the little thumbs up there, I'd appreciate it. So, Phoebe and I have a couple of things we want you to remember going into your week. I keep telling people over and over, I can't say this enough, all writing is political, speaking is political, and not writing or speaking is also political because silence maintains the status quo. So, as much as you can safely, use your voice to make the world a better place. And Phoebe, what's your advice for everybody going into their week?
If you have a car, don't forget these critical items for your emergency kit. A blanket to keep you warm, a flashlight to pierce the darkness, and a chemistry textbook so that you can recreate gunpowder if you're transported back in time or to another world.
It's a very, yep. I mean, yeah, we have to be prepared. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Phoebe.
Thank you for having me.
Here's a tiny bit of our bonus segment just for supporters of the Patreon.
Yeah, and it's all like in terms of like relative to what the expectation is,
Mm-hmm.
and just being aware of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And being made to be aware of that, right?
Yeah.
There's something that you can, I remember the first time 20 years ago or whatever, somebody pointed out to me that, cis het men, when we're walking through like a hallway, we have been trained to not step aside for people, to just walk in a straight line, and that women have been trained to move out of our way. And once that is brought to your attention. I used to share it with my students. I would say, next time you're out in the hall, notice who steps to the side and who walks in a straight line. And once it is brought to your attention, you can never unsee it again, right?
Hmm.
And that was a great illustration of the guys, especially in the room, had never noticed before. They didn't know they were even doing it until somebody said, do you recognize that this is what you've been trained to do? And so thinking about size in that same way, something as a
Yeah.
guy who's 5'10" and a half, I never would think I am big
Yeah,
because I haven't had the context.
and it's also the fear of or the concern of obviousness of
Right.
standing out too much. Especially of being for me sometimes of being clocked. It really depends. I am still very much very mask. I always wear masks inside buildings that are not my house. And